Let's begin with your book that you published in November of 2011.
Right.
Most of these types of books are not very good. Yours is actually a very good book. It's quick to read. You can read it in less than 2 hours. It's 150 some odd pages.
Not even.
And it's actually, there's some really good nuggets in it. So I wanted to focus on a couple. So when you first moved to Dallas post Indiana University, you made a list of all the jobs that you would love to do at some point in your life.
Right.
And so if you can remember this list, can you share with us what some of those jobs were and how it's evolved in terms of new additions or perhaps subtractions over the years?
When I got out of school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I graduated from Indiana, and couple of my buddies went down to Dallas, and they're like, "You got to come down. You got to come down." And I didn't know if I wanted to go to New York, Chicago, LA, but I had an old 77 Fiat X19 with a hole in the floorboard, and Dallas was the only real city I could make it to. And so they're like, "Look, the economy's great, the weather's great, the women are beautiful." I didn't hear the first two things, but I heard the women are beautiful. And so I was down there, and when I got there, I thought, okay, what hot industries? And so at that time, it was cable television, computers, through Radio Shack, bartending, consistent things like that. And I ended up getting my first job as a bartender at night, but then I was able to get a job selling computer software during the day.
So speaking of interesting jobs, one of your first jobs you talk about in your book is you were selling powdered milk, which sounds interesting.
It was horrible.
So maybe you can elaborate on that and tell us how that ultimately played out.
So I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. As far back as I can remember, I would sell baseball cards to my friends. I would buy and sell stamps and stamp collections. I was that kid in the neighborhood that was always trying to sell you something. I sold garbage bags door to door. But after I graduated from college, I was like, what can I do? I want to start my own business. I don't want to get a regular job. And so somebody came up to me and had this great idea that I should try. And they're like, "Look, milk's so expensive. If we sell powdered milk, we can sell it for less." And I'm like, "That's a great idea." So I started going out there and finding these powdered milk formulas. And the problem was it didn't taste so good. But I was like, well, people don't need good tasting milk if they save a lot of money. So that business lasted about 2 weeks. But I learned, you learn from your failures. Like I always tell people, it doesn't matter how many times you fail, you just have to be right one time. Then everybody can call you an overnight success.
That's right. So when you were at IU, you started a pub called Motley's Pub.
Yep.
And this was when you weren't even legal drinking age at the time.
No, I was 20.
Before your
I was 20.
senior year, I believe.
Yep.
So alcohol has usually been a relatively heavily regulated business.
Yep.
How did you actually pull that off?
I don't know. And so again, I was that hustling kid. So I used to throw parties to help pay for school. My dad would send me $20 every couple of weeks, and I had to figure out how to pay for the rest of it. And so I got loans, and then the rest was figure it out. And one of the things I would do was we would throw these parties either in our dorm room, or we would even go to the National Guard Armory. I remember we threw parties, and then we would rent out these bars on their slow nights and throw sorority and fraternity parties. And I wasn't old enough then, but we were making some money. And so the owner of the bar came to me and said, "You're better at this than I am. Why don't you take it over?" And I'm like, okay. And so we didn't know, I didn't get a lawyer involved or any of that. We just said, okay, we'll take it over, and that's what we did. And so no paperwork, and it was great. Literally, we were the hot bar on campus. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that I wasn't 21. I let in all my friends, and it worked great. It worked really, really. We had lines. I can show you pictures with lines around the block. I had the Eagles came in there, and da-da-da-da-da. It was great until they decided to rate us and realized that 3/4 of the people in there were like 17, 18, 19 years old. So again, one more failure that just taught me more.
That's great. You have a chapter in the book that is titled, "What Will You Remember When You Are 90?" which I think is
Right.
a great title. It's kind of a carpe diem theme, if you will. So I'd be curious if you can give us a couple of examples of your recent life experiences that you've added to that list.
So one of the attitude I got from my dad was, when you're older and you look back at your life, what will be the things that you remember? And think about that when you say yes or no to doing something that's really bizarre or really interesting. And so I've tried to take that attitude, whether it was, buying the Mavs or doing Dancing with the Stars, or if you really want to see me embarrass myself. And look, I have no problem embarrassing myself, as all my friends will tell you. But if it's something different and it's just something bizarre and interesting, I'll do it. So if you turn to TNT tonight, there's a show called Drop the Mic, and you'll see me rap. And I am the world's worst rapper, but it was so much fun. And so, when I'm 90 years old and I look back and say, should I have done Drop the Mic and rapped and looked like an idiot? Hell yes. Hell yes, right? Because I got this unique experience where this professional rapper taught me how to rap, and they gave me all this stuff, and I got to, battle with Rusev, this guy who wrestles for WWE, who's like 5'8" and 400 pounds of muscle, and who threatened to kick my ass in our little battle. So it was fun.
That's awesome. You come back to a phrase several times in your book when you say you just have to be right one time.
Yep.
And so you seem to have been right more than most. You also talk about just grinding and essentially outworking your competition. I'm curious if you've ever had a deal or an outcome where you think you actually lost because you were outworked.
Not because I was outworked, never. Yeah, never. The thing about no matter what you're doing, whether you're trying to be a bartender and learning drinks, whether you're a sales rep, whether you're a programmer, whether you're a consultant, whatever it may be, information now is available to everybody. And the common phrase, knowledge is power. And acquiring that knowledge is just effort. Going out and connecting to people and learning is just effort. And the one thing, I have all these stupid sayings, but the one thing in life that you can control is your effort. And that's 99% of the time. That's the difference between being successful and not being successful. Who worked a little bit harder? When you walk into a room to sell something or to be sold or to try to understand something or to deal with a problem with your kids or whatever it may be, education, who worked harder? That's typically, who worked harder at learning, that's typically going to be the person who has the advantage in the situation. Because we've all walked into situations where we weren't as prepared as we would have liked to be, or we thought we were and somebody knew more. That's the king. The one thing in life each and every person in this room can control from now to evermore is your effort.
I like it. Mark Cuban, undefeated and outworking everyone. That's quite good. I like it.
I didn't say I was undefeated, but I've gotten my ass kicked many times.
No. There's a quote that you reference in your book from George Gilder, and it's to the effect that unlimited choice is the holy grail of TV. But this book was...
this is an old book, yeah.
Yeah. So this is back in 2011 when you published, and you mentioned in your book that you disagreed with that concept. I'd be fascinated to get your kind of updated perspective on that, because we're obviously, some people argue we're in this age of kind of peak content. Is there more content that we can actually consume? So
No.
How do you think about that?
No, I mean, in terms of content, there's never too much content. There's just, because what we want and who we are and how we consume content changes every day through our experiences. The challenge of content isn't can you make it or is there too much. The challenge of content, whether it's business content, the proposals you make, what you put on your website, how you connect to people, is can you tell a good story? And now storytelling has evolved. It used to be we all congregated around the TV and there were 250 channels, but it was the best alternative to boredom. You come home, you're worn out, you sit there, one hand goes in the pants, the other hand goes on the beer, and you watch TV. Now, all the content comes to us. No matter where we are, there's a source of content. And who we are and how old we are and our experiences, that defines what we like. Just go to Twitch. Like I have a 9-year-old son who plays Fortnite all day, every day, if we would let him, right? And he'll watch Ninja. Now, Ninja is I don't know if you all know who he is. He's a big guy on Twitch that streams Fortnite games. And he came to the Mavs practice facility one day because we got to be friends just through random sources. He was a bigger star than when Tom Hanks came to visit. I mean, and this is a guy on Twitch. Now, Twitch is unlimited options of content related to gaming and other things, and they're expanding. YouTube, obviously, just unlimited content. And it's not like YouTube's struggling. Where the takeaway from all this is when there's so many options for content, as business people, you have to figure out how to connect with people. You have to know your audience, and you have to know how to tell a story. And honestly, that's not my strength. I literally, and I forget the name of the book, I'd have to look at my phone. I'm reading a book on storytelling because that's how people connect. We have so many choices. If you can't absorb us with something that engages us, a story, and simplify it into a story that we want to connect with, the next person is going to come in and take your business.
So you also mentioned in the book, and this, maybe it's changed, but you read on average 3 hours a day.
At least.
Wow. You said your wife hates it.
She hates a lot of shit I do, stuff I do. That's why I get along.
So I'm curious, you mentioned you have 3 children.
Yep.
Do you ask them to maintain a similar reading regimen?
Yeah, I mean, with my kids, it's, yes. In my household, I can be bribed if you read a book. Dad, how much do I get, or what can I get if I read this book and this book and this book? My middle daughter, Alyssa, my 12-year-old, wants a love sack, and so I gave her a book on girl entrepreneurs that she's got to read. My son wants an Oculus Rift headset, so he's got 3 books he's got to read. I'm not above bribing my children. I mean, it works. But yeah, reading to me is important. I've got 2 daughters, 12 and 15, and they're not big readers, but hopefully I can get them to adopt and adapt, because information is always going to be important. And there's different sources, podcasts and listening, and even Discover on Snapchat, is a source. But it's just about getting them excited about learning, because one of the greatest skills we all will have for our lives is a thirst to learn and knowing how to learn. Not everybody knows how to learn, and so I'm trying to get them educated early that life is constant change, and you're always going to have to learn.
Could you give us your favorite book that you've read in the last year?
What did I just read?
We didn't rehearse this, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. I don't know if there's one that stands out. I forget the name of the one on storytelling I'm reading now. It's good. I mean, I read a book called Mr. Putin that was really cool, that I was just curious about Vladimir Putin. Didn't know that he was a lawyer, didn't know he, was the assistant mayor in Leningrad. I mean, I read a book called The Master Algorithm by a guy named Domingo because I wanted to learn more. I'm firing my way through machine learning for idiots. I just try to grab whatever I can.
So let's go back to the topic of media. So you probably know a buddy of ours, Thomas Tull.
Uh-huh.
So Thomas, that's how I actually been doing independent film for the last 10 years. And so we're probably shooting our next film in May. And I'm curious, since you run Magnolia Pictures, I'm curious to get your kind of state of the union on the independent film business, especially as it relates to Netflix and Amazon and some of the big tech folks that are likely coming into the space.
Independent film is hard. It's really, really hard. If some of you have aspirations of making a lot of money and then getting into film, stop right now. I'll tell you a little known fact. I've been nominated as an executive producer for 7 Academy Awards. Haven't won yet, but I'll give you a quick story how hard it is. I got an email from a guy named Alex Gibney. If you've seen this movie about, it's called The Inventor, I think, about Elizabeth Holmes, who would people in Bad Blood, yeah. He did that movie. And so he emails me just a cold email in 2003. And he says, I've got all this Enron footage. And I email him back, and I'm like, is it exclusive to you? Do you have the rights to it? He emails me right back, yes. Email him again, how much to do this documentary? Emails me right back, $770,000. Email him right back, let's do it. 12 minutes, I greenlit that movie. That movie went on to be a documentary called Enron, the Smartest Guys in the Room, that at that time was a top 10 all-time grossing documentary, got nominated for 1 Academy Award. Not 3 months later, my partner, Todd Wagner, who I do almost everything with, is incredible, comes to me and says, we've got this deal with George Clooney and Participant Films, and it's a movie that's going to be in black and white about old-time newsrooms, and it's going to be $8 million. We pay half, but it's going to star George Clooney. I'm like, do we get to hang out with George Clooney? Like, yeah. Okay, read the script. It was really good. So we do this movie, Good Night and Good Luck. Second movie ever greenlit, took minutes, gets nominated for 6 Academy Awards. And I get to have an Academy Award night party with at Dantana's in LA, I'm thinking, okay, I'm killing it. Literally, my first 2 movies, 7 Academy Award nominations. That was 2005. Anybody know any other movies I did? It's hard. And so we actually have gotten out of the original production business because it's that hard. And with Magnolia, we stick to distribution. And, you know, we just did a movie, RBG, that got nominated for an Academy Award, but we distributed it as opposed to make it. And so the reason it's so hard is that there's a lot of choices. Now, people will still go to the movies. We just sold Landmark Theaters, but we had a great year. So people go, and it's a great way to get out of the house. It's great something to do. Movies had a great year last year, but if you're producing them, particularly independent films, it's hard. There's no formula. There's no way you can assure you're going to make money. And if you don't tell a good story, you're going to lose all your money.
Very, very true. So sticking to the media theme, last November you sold your theater chain, Landmark Theaters. So I think there's a perspective that if you're buying from Mark Cuban, Mark may know more about the business than you do. So should we interpret that sale as a market top?
No.
A strategic shift or other?
Other. I was just tired of it. Yeah. It's like, okay, why am I spending all this time on this and not even spend all that much time? And it was like, time to move on. That was it in a nutshell. The guy who bought it would be great. He'll probably do a better job than we did.
Got it. All right, let's shift gears entirely. Let's cover kind of beyond media, some kind of currently popular investment topics. So
Okay.
You've been on record with respect to crypto and Bitcoin.
Yep.
So I've heard something to the effect that you rather own a pet rock than a pet Bitcoin.
I didn't quite say that. No, what I said was they're more like baseball cards or gold, right? Cryptocurrencies are worth what somebody else will pay for them. And if you want to get fancy, people will call it a store of value, right? It's a way to store value, which is kind of like gold, right? Gold's a religion to a lot of people. They say, well, if everything goes to hell in a handbasket and everything collapses, gold will be there, and you use gold. Who the hell is going to carry around gold bars? Hey, I got a gold bar here in my back. You're dead. It just doesn't make any sense. And crypto is a little bit, at least there's a technological value behind cryptocurrencies in terms of managing a distributed database, in terms of having authentication for information, smart contracts. There's a lot of arguments you can make why there's value, particularly with the blockchain. But in terms of investing in Bitcoin, and I've bought some and I've sold some, it's a crapshoot. It's like buying a baseball card or buying a comic book. Once you look at the baseball card and it says, oh, Mickey Mantle, that's cool. Time to sell it. What will someone buy it for? So be careful. If you don't have an exact theme, don't buy it expecting it to go up. There's already been a lot of people that have lost money. I'm not saying it won't go up. I'm not saying it won't go down, but just realize it's about supply and demand and not some intrinsic value pushing what it's worth.
So another sector, so to speak, that gets a lot of hype right now is cannabis.
Uh-huh.
And so you have a phrase, which I love, there's a sequence of inventors, imitators, and then idiots.
Right.
So where are we in the sequence of those three I's?
So I stole a line from Warren Buffett, who says, first comes the innovators, then the imitators, then the idiots. Think about it. And when you're looking to get into a business that 10,000 people are already in, why do you want to be 10,001? And so cannabis, I guess you got to be careful how you sample your own product, but I'm not against the cannabis business per se, but it's like any other business now. The emails I get and the people who come up to me, dude, cannabis, it's the future. So it's no different than any other business. There's no real advantage except that it's regulated, and if it's regulated, big companies are going to get into it, and if big companies get into it, they're going to use regulation to their advantage. So be careful. Unless it's just for recreational use, then call Jack.
Good stuff. There's a YouTube video of you doing an interview at a Goldman Sachs event about a year ago, and there was a great bit about you telling the fellow about how you essentially called the demise of Netscape in advance. And so I'd be curious, given that I think we could probably argue that we're not in the early innings of the tech cycle now.
No.
would there be a similar company or at least a sector that you think is potentially going to go a similar kind of route of the dodo that Netscape did?
It's really different now. There's probably some out there. What's changing everything, and I know you're going to get into this future, is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is changing everything, and you know, I've been through a lot of technological revolutions. I was there when PCs first started. I was there when local area networks first started. I was there when the internet first started. I was there when HD first started, and I made money in each of those sectors because I can stay a little bit ahead. But if you think back to all of them, when I first started selling PCs, which was my job I got after I was a bartender in Dallas, I would walk in and people say, we don't need PCs. I write it by hand. I've got this ledger. I've got this person here who types it up on their typewriter. And then I was like, okay, here's what a spreadsheet does. Yeah, a spreadsheet cost $500 back then, but you can use it to play what if and learn. And it had an impact. It improved productivity. Then we started connecting them together, and I would say, well, if you connect these PCs together, offices can talk to each other, people can share data. I don't need to do that. I just carry this 5¼ inch floppy from this PC to that PC, and everybody shares it. And then people, now we can't live with local area networks. Then the internet, that changed everything too. Now we can communicate with everybody. But now we've seen those advances. With artificial intelligence, it's what if to the 1000th degree. Right now, the challenges we have as entrepreneurs and business people is we use our experience. And based off our experience, we put ourselves out there and say, here's some different options that I want to explore because I've done these things 1,000 times before, or I have a feel for this business, or I have the ability to tell a story or sell this product or understand this product. But we're limited by our time or the people we have around us or the access to information. What AI does, whether it's machine learning, neural networks, whatever it is, but generally, it's able to take an unlimited amount of data and go through it and pop out information that even the best experienced person couldn't think of. And why is that important? Well, why it's important is bigger companies have more data, have more processing power, can go through more options, more variables, and start to compete in different ways. That's how Amazon knows that if you had a stomach ache, they're going to, send you 5 other options when you go to Amazon because you bought, medicine for your stomach ache or something for your stomach ache. That's why Netflix knows if you watch this, and it says if you watch this, you might like that. Well, what are we as small businesses going to do? That's the challenge right now. That's where you as a small business entrepreneur or working or running a small business as a CEO, you have to put in that effort to start to understand how it really works. Now, what did I do? I literally went onto Amazon AWS and took their tutorial, their introduction to machine learning. It took me some time to fight my way through it. You didn't have to learn stats. You didn't have to be a programmer. But it educated me on how to use it. I mentioned earlier, The Idiot's Guide to Machine Learning. For those of you who are old enough who remember getting on the internet for the first time and struggling through it and expecting someone to teach you about it and then getting on mobile and, oh, what's this app thing that's going on? This is the same thing times 100. You're going to need to know how to integrate it into your companies because you're going to need how to do more than just what if from your own personal experiences. You're going to have to know what all the data that is coming from your customers, from your products, for however you can source data, what it's really telling you. Because as Jeff Bezos says, your margin is my opportunity. And so if you don't do it, even in the smallest business, if you don't understand the relationship between capturing data that represents your business, your customers, and other parts of your business, and plowing through it with machine learning, and then having the machine learning spit out recommendations or options that you probably hadn't considered, you're going to be at a disadvantage to the 23-year-old kid coming out of school right now. I'm taking, a class right now on Coursera, Introduction to AI. I mean, it's boring as shit, but, we took accounting classes, we took finance classes, we took whatever classes you took, marketing, sales. Those are skills that you need to be successful at some level in business. This is the new thing you need to be successful of. So in terms of, who's going to jump the shark, what are the problems? That's a problem for small business that we have to address. And it's not just about, I'm just going to hire some kid who just graduated in computer science, because you have to have an understanding. Right now, we as business people, we capture so much data. Our brains are the best computer ever. And we process through it. And we're able to understand what's happening in our business. And that's good, but now you have to start looking at that data and how do you make it capturable in spreadsheets to start, databases, whatever it may be for your company, but you need to do it now. And you'll thank me in 2, 3, 4 years, because it's not going to slow down. It's only going to get more advanced.
So to follow up on the AI topic, just to jump ahead a little bit in my notes. So our mutual friend, Elon Musk, claims that AI is more dangerous than nuclear weapons. How do you feel about that?
I mean, you can make the story that that's true. I don't know when, but so put your Terminator hat on, and processor speeds and performance are going to go like this, right? That's what's really, the reason AI has become so big in the last few years is because companies like NVIDIA and others, Taiwan Semiconductor, Intel, their processor speeds have just accelerated in ways that we hadn't expected or didn't expect, or I didn't expect. And now you can process all this data. So think about Arnold and coming back. And the chip that sees everything in front of them and processes the data, that chip is already there. The two things that are missing are the manual dexterity for Arnold to be able to grab things and ride a motorcycle and twirl a gun and put on clothes. That's 30 years away. And the power sources that's small enough to fit in a steel Arnold and last for 24 hours, I don't know how far away that is. It could be 3 years, it could be 100 years. I don't know. But when those two things come together, it's going to be crazy. And it's not, I don't think it's going to be probably not worse than nuclear war, just because you can't come back from that. I think it'll be more like biological warfare, right? Where there's always that fear that some idiot puts something in the water stream and impacts a lot of people. But, we kind of come to agreements around the world, in ways to prevent that. I think we'll be able to come up with ways to detect serial numbers and track serial numbers of chips and batteries that are that powerful, and then the robots that do those things. So I'm not as concerned as Elon is, but it's something that our kids are going to have to pay attention to.
So sticking on the topic of Elon, you came to his defense a couple days ago with respect to a spat that he's been having with the SEC.
Right.
And you have your own history with the SEC.
Yep.
I'd be curious, if I were to anoint you the commissioner of the SEC, what you would do to fix that organization.
I'm glad you asked. So does anybody here run a public company or had to deal with the SEC? Okay, just a few folks. So if you ever have to deal with SEC-related issues, and you're curious about, is this okay or that okay, or is this a problem? Can I do this? Can I tweet about my company? Can I, and you went to the SEC, well, I did that. And I went to the SEC and I said, I have a question. I want to talk, I'm potentially going to invest in a company and I want to talk to the CEO. Before I invest, I want to know what I can and can't ask him and what he can and can't tell me, because I don't want to get in trouble with the SEC. I fought them for 8 years. They're sleazy as hell, and I kicked their ass, but I don't want to deal with that again. And so I called them, and I talked to them twice on the phone, and you know what they told me? They sent me, if you have any questions, they sent me to a webpage on the sec.gov website that was a picture of a fax dated 1980 saying, whatever questions you have, fax 8 copies of it to this number and we'll try to get back to you. That's our SEC. That's who we're looking to protect our market. So what would I do? I think what we need are bright line regulations. What the SEC does, they do something called regulation through litigation. They'll sue somebody in order to get a precedent put in place in order to have a new law that they can sue other people over. And like with Elon Musk, with Twitter, Elon made a mistake. He was wrong in what he did, but at the same time, he should have been there should have been bright line guidelines to say you can and cannot do this. They shouldn't have to sue him for everybody to know that this is wrong. And so what I would do is just put up the bright line regulations. I would put up a list of things that says, here are the things that we've learned from all the lawsuits we filed, and you can or cannot do this. And if you weren't sure, here's a number to call. That's it. That is it. And so with that in mind, no one will have any excuses. If those are there and you have the ability just to Google them and have them come up, and you still violate them, go to jail, do not pass go, you're screwed, right? But there shouldn't be a situation where you weren't sure and you don't know, and you have to pay a lawyer $900 an hour to tell you, well, we're not sure either, because the SEC won't tell us. That's just wrong. And so the SEC, the head of the SEC has changed multiple times, but they haven't gotten any better when it comes to regulation.
Excellent. So sticking on the regulatory topic, there's been a lot of backlash towards big tech recently.
Yep.
So Elizabeth Warren calling for the breakup of big tech.
Yep.
AOC essentially driving Amazon out of New York.
Right.
What's your take on all that? Do you think the pendulum is going to swing back at some point, or do you think this is going to continue?
No, it's going to continue. First of all, Elizabeth Warren is wrong when she talks about breaking up big tech, and it has nothing to do with whether I like or dislike Elizabeth Warren. You've just heard me talk about AI over and over and over again. Right now, our federal government and our states are just starting to put together policies on AI and trying to determine what the investments will be for AI. Do you know who is making the biggest investments into AI that are allowing us to compete with China and Russia? Vladimir Putin said whoever dominates AI dominates the world. You know who's investing the most? The big tech companies. So if you break them up, you're diminishing probably the most important topic and the most important issue that we face. I just talked about Terminators. You can laugh, you can think I'm an idiot, or think I'm right, but we're not fighting that battle the way we need to. Our defense, the defense, different three-letter agencies, they're going to those big companies trying to get their help. Those are the companies that are hiring the best talent everywhere, paying them $1 million salaries plus. And if you break up those companies, you immediately make each one of I think she wanted, if a company had more than 25 billion in sales, I forget her exact criteria, but you immediately diminish our abilities within artificial intelligence. Now that said, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be issues that we address with all the big companies. Amazon is my largest stock holding. It's grown huge. And Netflix is my second largest, same thing. But I think Amazon is wrong when they make their own OEM or white label versions of things that they see are selling. I think if they don't change it, they're going to face federal regulators and antitrust litigation. And so it doesn't mean all these companies are right in everything that they do, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't change some things. And it's the same with Facebook. Look, Facebook isn't a utility. It's not. You don't have to use Facebook. You can still text pictures to grandma. You can still do whatever you want. But Facebook worldwide has taken on a completely different level of import. And so I think maybe regulation isn't the right word, but being able to have a closer relationship and dealing and adding different regulations. And I'll give you the perfect example, elections, right? This coming election, and we got a lot of folks here that are involved in politics, people are going to run ads, and they're running out. Every election, there's ad after ad after ad. And the way to really put out the best ads to get the greatest results is on Facebook. Why? Because Facebook has so much information, all that AI we talked about, so much information and so much influence on tens of millions, 100 million plus people in this country. And what political advertisers are doing is using that information and really hitting home with things that are important to us. Now, that's okay. But when they do that, they don't just run one ad. They'll run hundreds of thousands of ads looking for the things that catch your attention. You are a pet lover that thinks it's horrible that pets need to be spayed, yada, yada. They'll find you and run an ad that says, my candidate thinks it's horrible to spay pets, just to get you to vote. Now, I'm fine with that as well, but what I think needs to happen is there needs to be a registry of every single ad so that we know that everybody who's in a race, all Americans, everybody in this country knows what ads are being run, what criteria they use for those ads, only, loves spayed pets or doesn't like spayed pets. And that's in a registry that's public on a .gov website and available to everybody. Then we know what's going on. Then at least we have the information. Right now, we don't do that. That's part one. The second thing I would do applies to AI algorithms. We talked about machine learning. Neural networks is a little bit different. Machine learning doesn't think for itself. It doesn't do what's called generalizing. Neural networks, as these processors get faster, it starts to think isn't the right word, but it starts to generalize and come up with new things. It reacts to the knowledge it's already created for itself. You can call that learning, maybe, maybe not. But that creates those algorithms that are behind it, they become black box. We don't know what they're doing. Facebook, Google don't know what their algorithms are, their most advanced algorithms, or I should say their most advanced neural networks are doing. Those black boxes, those algorithms need to be in a vault somewhere just in case the shit hits the fan and something goes wrong. And so that type of regulation, I think, is warranted. But just Elizabeth Warren saying break up companies, you always got to be aware of the law of unintended consequences, and I think it would backfire on it.
So staying on kind of the regulatory theme, you've been a critic of the ACA. And I was listening to this interview you had with the Goldman folks. You had a really innovative plan. I think you called it the 10 plan.
Yeah, we changed the name, but yeah, that's what it was.
So maybe you could just give us the quick cliff notes, because I know you're working on this politically. You're kind of making the rounds, talking to folks. It'd be great to kind of get the gist of it.
So we called it the 10 plan originally. Effectively, the only safety net, if you don't have Medicare, Medicaid, or employer-based insurance, the only safety net you have is the ACA or GoFundMe. I mean, think about this. And if you need the government to guarantee a student loan, you want to go to University of Arizona, you can get that guarantee. If you're a small business and you get a small business loan through your bank, you can get the government to guarantee that. Somebody will loan you money for your small business if you qualify. If you're about to die and you need a heart transplant and you don't have insurance, what do we tell you to do? Your best option, your friends tell you to go to GoFundMe. We won't loan somebody money. We won't help somebody that's about to die. So I looked at it and I said, okay, as an entrepreneur, how would I solve this problem? And I looked at my own businesses. In my own businesses, we self-insure. We don't use an insurance company. I looked at the companies that have 5,000 more employees or more employees. 96% of them don't use insurance companies for insurance. So I said, what would something look like if we self-insured? We originally called it the 10 plan, but effectively I put together a plan that I've been working up the ladder that says instead of giving money under the ACA to insurance companies, because what does an insurance company do? They create their own networks, they complicate things, they obfuscate the data, but if you give money to an insurance company to subsidize an insurance premium, that person who has the insurance has to fight to get it back. And out of the ACA, of the 47 million people who are eligible in that market, like 12 million people only have insurance. That leaves 35 million people whose best option is GoFundMe or credit cards. So I put together this thing called the 10 plan. We're changing it to the safety plan that effectively says, rather than giving that money to the insurance companies, let's give it to the providers to pay, the hospitals, the healthcare providers, to pay when someone needs help. But before we pay for that, we're going to look at the earnings and the income of the person who needs help. If you work for $10 an hour and you work in home health care and you're, whatever you do, it's $10 an hour, 40 hours a week, you're making $20,000 a year, you're going to pay a $25 copay. That's it. Instead of giving that money to the insurance company, that money is coming to help you. If you make $100,000 a year, you're going to pay 10% of your income. You're going to pay what you can afford to pay effectively. It's means tested. And if it's, you sprained an ankle and it cost you $1,000 and you can just write a check, great, because you didn't have to pay insurance premiums. If you lose life's lottery and it costs more, all right, we'll loan you that money. Now we're going to deduct it from your payroll and we're going to take between 3 and 10% depending on how much you earn, but you're going to be the first person to pay that back. If it's just horrific and you have a chronic illness, Okay, you're still going to pay your percentage. It might be nothing if you make 20K. It might be 10% if you make 100K. But after 15 years, we'll waive the balance. So you'll have to pay it out, and what you can't pay, the government will pay. But unlike some of the single payer things or Medicare for all, we're not going to have to raise taxes because all that money has already been allocated for Obamacare. It's already there. Now, how do I know the math works? I went to the most far left economists that I could find, and I went to the people who helped start the ACA, and I said, help me design this model. And you know what they came back with? That doing the 10 plan, now called the safety plan, just as I explained it, you pay what you can afford, and above no more than 10% of your income, the government helps with the rest. We save $45 billion a year for patients, $40 billion a year for the government, for the federal government. Just by letting people pay what they can afford, but most importantly, taking the insurance companies out. Why do the insurance companies add so much cost? Because think about your insurance programs right now. Every year it's a different network. Every year, different doctors. Now, when that happens, they have to negotiate those deals with the hospitals and all the care providers, which means the hospitals, 31% of their costs are via administration costs. Then there's the 15% that the insurance companies get to take called the medical loss ratio right off the top. When you put all that money back in, instead of giving it to the insurance companies, it actually pays for health care and the numbers work. So what am I doing in dealing with it? And I mentioned this to the governor a little bit earlier. I went to HHS, Secretary Azar, and Seema Verna, head of the CMS, and there's actually a waiver, a 1332 waiver. And I'm working together to put together the waivers, and I'll be going to different states, hopefully including Arizona. So instead of Obamacare, you'll have the safety net. And instead of paying insurance premiums, if you're healthy, you'll never pay an insurance premium again. You keep that money in your pocket, you can put it in an HSA, health savings account, and pay for it and use that when you need it. And so I'm going through that process now. It works. I think it has great upside. That is what I want to be my legacy. That's what I've been working on this for 2 years. I can tell you more about healthcare and healthcare costs. I can tell you that, 27 million claims, insurance claims, are denied a year under Medicare. That'll change with this. I can tell you that insurance companies silo all their data so artificial intelligence can't be used to find better cures and find better outcomes. That'll change. So I don't want to go on too far because I get all worked up about it, but there you go.
Last question, on a more serious note, you've been involved with the Fallen Patriot Fund. It's very special to you. I want to let you know that Envision is going to make a donation. I'm personally going to match that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I wanted, if you could just kind of tell us how you got involved and what it means to you.
Well, the Fallen Papers is actually morphed, right? So it's part of the Mark Cuban Foundation now. But when Operation Iraqi Freedom happened back in 2003, I just said any families of soldiers who are out there serving our country, putting their lives on the line, who needed financial help, I would provide it. And so I didn't go out there or solicit donations, even though we got some. And so, I think I've spent now $5.8 million, I forget whatever it is. Just if somebody needs a bill paid and they were part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, then I pay the bill. If somebody needs a procedure done, I pay for it. Before every Mavs game, I say a little prayer that says, I'm not here doing what I do unless those folks, the people who serve our country, do what they do. I never want to take them for granted. And so, whether it's with the Fallen Patriot Fund or other things, or investing in servicemen or service family run businesses, I never want to take it for granted, and I always want to help where I can. So, thank you.
Well, Mark, this has been a lot of fun. We want to be respectful of your time. Thanks for making the trip to Phoenix here today. And again, we really appreciate it. And thanks again.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. It was fun.